Everybody loves a comeback story, and for Arsen Lilliev, that comeback story is going to happen at East First West number 12, where he's going to face Brandon Ellsessor from the United States of America. It's always an interesting thing when somebody comes back. Now, Arsen Lilliev is one of the all-time greats in the sport when it comes to achievements. This Russian monster, top roll monster, as I would describe him, really was characterized by some of the most explosive hits from go, enormous biceps with huge back pressure, and despite not being a tall man, he was a dominant top roll arm wrestler. Now, he's going to be facing Brandon Ellsessor, who, like Arsen, is a top roll arm wrestler, but Brandon is not the explosive hit style arm wrestler. He's more a control, squeeze based, gain position style arm wrestler. So this will be an interesting match for Arsen in his comeback to face Brandon Ellsessor. Some might call it a warm-up, some might call it a test. Either way, we're going to have a look at how this match could stylistically come together, what options are going to be there for Arsen, what options are going to be there for Brandon, and try to make sense of what we're about to see. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about Arsen Lilliev. This Russian arm wrestler is so explosive through the bicep and through the hand. His side pressure really was a killer of genuine giants, with wins over people like Denis Saplenkov, John Brzenk, I think countless Russian national titles. The long list of legends that he has defeated during his prime is significant. Now, Arsen Lilliev's style of arm wrestling is one of those ones that sort of bucks the trend. Usually when someone is a shorter forearm, smaller handed arm wrestler, they're normally inclined to be power on power, wrist on wrist, or hook pulling. For Arsen, he went the other way. He said, no, it doesn't matter that I have a biomechanical disadvantage. I'm going to have so much bicep. I'm going to have so much pronation and rise that I'm just going to blow people apart anyway. And he commanded the high ground from the lower position. Now, this truly is an anomaly. I do think of other arm wrestlers like maybe Hermes Gasparini, who can do the same thing on occasion against tall guys. But Arsen did it with a hit through the thumb that was truly explosive. Now, his style of arm wrestling, like I said, it is one of those ones where it's unique. So for Brandon Ellsessor coming up against the returning Arsen Lilliev, it's going to be very, very challenging. Now, Arsen Lilliev's strengths have to be his bicep, have to be his shoulder, and have to be his pronation. Those three things are really what form his main weapons. When you see Arsen training, he doesn't just train from the elbow. He trains with the shoulder as well. He likes to lift his elbow off the ground and actually make sure that there is a good connection between the relationship that his shoulder strength, his elbow strength, and his pronation all has together. Now, that really does form what makes Arsen Lilliev's hit so effective. A lot of the time, arm wrestling is done, particularly for defensive style arm wrestlers, from the elbow forward. They plant their elbow hard and they catch and supinate, they get into hook, they block with their shoulder at times, but they don't really use their core, they don't really use their lower back as all part of an explosive hit. Now, Arsen Lilliev is a really good example of combining as many muscle groups as you possibly can into one hit, okay, that your opponent has to absorb. So when Arsen trains, he floats his elbow. That engages his shoulder way more than if he was just to rest his elbow and use just triceps sort of levering pointed through the bicep and brachialis. So he floats, he keeps his shoulder engaged, he gets his bicep engaged, and his pronation, particularly through the thumb and the rise, all is linked very nicely. This results in an enormous hit from the go. Now, if I had to come up with a vulnerability for someone like Arsen Lilliev, look, in this circumstance, we can talk about the fact he's coming out of retirement. There is a lot of mental pressure. He's facing a gentleman who has, let's be honest, and it's no slight on Brandon Ellsessor, but Brandon Ellsessor has nowhere near the achievements of Arsen Lilliev. But Brandon Ellsessor is current. He's actually been in and amongst arm wrestling for a lot of years now, and he is one of USA's best arm wrestlers, particularly from that 220 to 235 to 40 pound range. He's got some good wins, he's got some solid defenses and losses here and there, a bit of a mixed bag in his results, but he is without a doubt a quality arm wrestler. So that does bring some pressure for Arsen Lilliev. Now, biomechanically, I believe Brandon Ellsessor will be the taller man. Look, usually this would mean a hard day for Arsen Lilliev trying to top roll, but Arsen Lilliev has such an amazing style that he just doesn't care. He gets in that strap and he just fires that top roll away. So given that he is someone who is confident that will secure that top roll, the real vulnerability for him is to get forced into a lane that he just wasn't expecting. Does Brandon Ellsessor have the ability to dead wrist defend? I honestly don't think so. Does Brandon Ellsessor have the ability to put him in a hook? Maybe. Look, putting a shorter man in a hook is a biomechanical, easier thing to do than putting a tall man in a hook. So Brandon Ellsessor will have the opportunity, if he wants to consider trying to put Arsen Lilliev in a hook. Now, Arsen Lilliev in a hook still means Arsen Lilliev is going sideways incredibly aggressively. He's still rotating through, and his side pressure hit is monstrous, even if it is forced into what looks like for him a high hook position. So Brandon Ellsessor does have that opportunity. He can reach past the arm and reach past the rotation of Arsen Lilliev fairly easily, given that Brandon is the taller man. But look, Arsen, it's hard to really pick a vulnerability in him. The only one I can see is he's coming out of retirement and that he's got the dust to shake off, because this man truly is a beast. Okay, so to talk about Brandon Ellsessor, as I mentioned earlier, he is the kind of arm wrestler that is a top roll predominant arm wrestler who has a hook, a little bit of an all-round flavor to him, not incredibly offensive, not incredibly defensive. I would put Brandon Ellsessor in that class of arm wrestler that is almost a counter-attacking, feel and respond kind of guy. He is someone that can really arm wrestle anywhere. Now, he is coming up against Arsen Lilliev, as we've said, who is an all-out explosive short-arm top roller. This does present a unique problem for someone like Brandon Ellsessor, because there is one major weapon that he possesses in his opponent, and Brandon doesn't really have one major weapon. Brandon's really going to have the option to try to win height, which he can do. He can win height with his forearm, no worries, but what he needs to also be aware of is winning wrist and winning access to pronation. Arsen does have a great ability through his thumb to prevent those things from happening, even when he is the shorter man. So Brandon Ellsessor, biomechanically, I'm sure will test and look for that high ground. If he can't get the high ground, he does, as we mentioned earlier in the vulnerabilities of Arsen, Brandon has the ability to come forward, rise up, lower his arm, and get past and around and force a hook. Now, look, this sounds like it biomechanically is the right choice, but then I go back and think about the people that Arsen Lilliev has beaten when they tried to hook him. Like I said, Arsen Lilliev has wins on Denis Saplenkov. Okay, and Denis is probably the biggest, strongest, hand-based, bicep-based, hook-based arm wrestler that we've seen in a very, very long time. So it's hard to see Brandon Ellsessor doing that. But look, at the end of the day, Brandon Ellsessor has a wide range of tools. He is a predominant top roller himself, although Arsen is going to command control of that ground. Arsen is explosive. Brandon is much more responsive. It's a difficult one. I honestly do fear for Brandon Ellsessor's well-being in this match. I feel like he is going to potentially be a bit of a punching bag for an explosive return to Arsen Lilliev. Now, of course, I could be completely wrong, and he could absolutely douse the flames of the return of Arsen Lilliev, and he could completely control him and make Arsen's top roll non-existent. That may be the case as well. Okay, so whilst we're talking about vulnerabilities for Brandon Ellsessor, I have to say it's his lack of speed off the go. Arsen is someone that is incredibly fast-twitched, and we know how good his top roll is. For Brandon to get the brakes on Arsen, he's going to need to really read the setup correctly and really make the right decisions early on in the match. He can't afford to make errors and have his arms sort of opened up. So the lack of speed and explosivity is going to be a problem. Arsen really is explosive. I don't know that the return to Arsen is. I mean, he's older, he's a little bit heavier. That does tend to slow things down, but historically speaking, Arsen was dynamite, and Brandon is going to be vulnerable to that factor. The one way that you can counter speed is with straight up hand strength. Now, that is the one way. Height, pronated, static strength, and the ability to squeeze in the fingers, to chop down with the ulna, like ulnar deviation, those sorts of things can entirely negate someone who has speed or quickness off the go. That is how Brandon Ellsessor is going to have to deal with that. I don't know. I'm not sure if he's got it. We'll see. He'll probably try for it to get that control. but it is definitely his vulnerability in this match. Ultimately, this is just an all-round really cool match to be seeing at East First 12 because it's got two things that we just all love. One, the return of an absolute legend of the sport, Arsen Lilliev, and the other, a tried and tested, good American arm wrestler that gets to test himself against a former legend. It's always interesting because this one, even though we have a gut feel as, whoa, Arsen's amazing and he's back, we just never know. We have seen many returns to the sport that haven't gone so successful. Sometimes people come back and they're straight back to where they were. Pressure's on Arsen here. There is no pressure on Ellsessor. Brandon gets to swing for the fences. If he wins, fantastic. If he loses, well, it was Arsen Lilliev at the end of the day. So this, for both guys, is an awesome match, an awesome opportunity, and I cannot wait to watch it. It's happening at East vs. West 12. And guys, I would love to know what you think. Who's taking this one? Is it the return of the monster, Arsen Lilliev, or will Brandon Ellsessor get the job done?